Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us. My name is Jason Montgomery, and I'm with EE Tech and All About Circuits. Thanks for joining us for this Digikey Ambassador Program webinar. The name of this session is Career Readiness and Professionalism, Building a Complete LinkedIn Profile for Electrical and Computer Engineers. I'm really excited to have our two presenters that are with us here today. The first person that we've got is YC Wang, who's the Director of the Global Academic Program at Digikey Electronics. If you've come to any of our previous Ambassador webinars, you'll certainly recognize him. And I'm also happy to introduce Jim Burnham, who's the Mechatronics Instructor at SVCTE. So everyone who's here, thank you for joining us. Make sure that if you haven't submitted questions already, you'll have a chance to, throughout the presentation, submit questions for that live Q&A that we're going to have afterwards with Jim once we've gotten through everything. And with that, YC, I'll hand it off to you to do a little bit of presenting yourself.
Okay, thank you very much there, Jason. And so very nice to meet you all again. My name is YC Wang, and I am the Global Academic Director at Digikey. And so just a little bit about myself. I came from an electrical engineering background, and Jim and I actually worked at a semiconductor previously, so we were colleagues. Jim was in charge of creating new evaluation boards for FPGAs, and he oversaw the process. And I've always been in awe by his ability to keep track of all the minutiae and details to make sure it meets customer and company requirements and specifications. So it's a real privilege of mine to have Jim on this call with us. Jim is now an instructor, and he really loves teaching, and he really loves conveying interesting new concepts and ideas to students. So real quick about the Digikey academic program. So next slide, please. Okay, so real quick about the Digikey academic program. The Digikey academic program is your partner for all academic solutions. We're here for you, whether you're designing a project, looking for data sheets, looking for information, looking for reference designs, or online calculators that you can use to calculate everything from capacitance to drawing schematics and block diagrams. We also have lots of videos online that you can use to educate yourself with. We have the series online right now called Another Teaching Moment, and we also have a lot of our student ambassadors submit projects and videos of their projects that you can find on maker.io. So I'll put all the links into the chat box once Jim's portion of this presentation starts. And again, it's a privilege for the Digikey academic program to present this this webinar today. And just real quick on the agenda, okay? In the slide here, you can see that we're talking about the electrical engineering and the computer engineering technical expertise combo. Actually, Max, please make sure we're at the next slide. So, and as you can see, there are many different areas that electrical engineering can take you in the electrical engineering field. This is a very good, quick overview of some of the possibilities. I would say not all of them, but I would say that for many of you who are on this webinar right now, you will land in one of these jobs highlighted here. But however, before you even get there, right, the question is, how do you present yourself to employers? How do you present yourself in a professional manner so that the employers will pay attention to you? You have to realize that in addition to your resume, in addition to your LinkedIn profile online, there are hundreds of thousands of other profiles and resumes, all trying to get the attention from potential employers. And so today's webinar will be talking about the best way to make yourself stand out, the best way to highlight your experiences and knowledge, and also the various projects you've worked on. So without further ado, I'm going to hand this presentation over to Jim. Jim?
All right. So, YC, thank you for the kind words. I'm kind of excited about this presentation. Being able to figure out how to represent yourself professionally is always been an interest to me, and just how people perceive you is really important. And so let me just give you a little more background about me. I'm an engineer. I worked in industry for 25 plus years, and much of that time, while my role was doing design work or as YC said, designing boards and PCB boards and speccing those kind of things out and doing a lot of applications and things like that. During my career, I actually spent quite a bit of time basically recruiting for our group, right? So myself and other engineers would go out to colleges and job fairs and things like that to actually do interviews. And so I kind of have spent some time actually at the recruiting side of looking at resumes and looking at portfolios and looking at projects and seeing what people are presenting and how they present themselves. And so it's always been an interest to me. And so now that I'm a teacher and I teach engineering, I want to make sure that my students and you see that it's kind of really important for you to actually be able to represent yourself in a way that that highlights your skills, makes you stand out. If you think about like everyone from your graduating engineering class or whatever program that you happen to be in, everybody's taken the same classes, right? And so you can't just say, oh, I did this program and these are the classes that I took, because you don't stand out. And so that's kind of what we're going to be talking a little bit about today. You can see there my steam clown. That's my alter ego. I teach science, technology, engineering, art, and math as part of what I think an engineer should be doing. So, all right, so let's kind of jump in. All of my presentations, I'm a super huge fan of open source, so all my presentations are open source and available for anybody to use. All right, so the objective today, really what we're going to be thinking about and talking about is what is that first impression? How do you make that a positive interaction? By the end of this session, I hope that you really understand how to create that impression, that first impression. How do you create a profile that's professional, versus maybe fun, right? And how do you really tell that story about yourself? So we got to figure out how to do it right. Your career now is going to be a series of first meetings, first introductions, first connections, right? And you really want to understand like how to maximize the ability to tell the story about yourself, sometimes in a really, really short time. So we're going to talk about these four things really first as we talk about a LinkedIn profile. Whether you have a LinkedIn profile or not, if you don't, you should definitely go create one. And we're going to talk about this because this is not specifically to LinkedIn, although everything we talk about will be LinkedIn related. But it's really your whole online persona. Like, how do you present yourself? And so some of these tips and tricks that I'm going to talk about here, they apply to really all of your social media environments. So let's talk about that first impression and kind of the psychology of this, right? I mean, we evaluate people really quickly. We meet someone for the first time and we tend to make a decision about them really, really fast, right? It's kind of like a lizard brain where we encounter something new. We need to make sure that, like, are they a threat? Are they going to help us? How do I categorize this person? And so, unfortunately, right, we get judged, right? Because people are making those same impressions about us. We get judged about our facial features, our body types, whether somebody thinks we're attractive or intelligent, how we dress affects that, even the way our voice sounds. And so we need to think about that kind of stuff because some of those things we can't change, right? And so we need to be able to come up with a way to present ourselves in the best possible way so that that first impression really goes over well. And so we all have pre perceptions and the way that we think about people, and we really have a hard time overcoming these. And so if you go to some meetup or some conference or something, and you meet someone and they're behaving badly, that really sticks with you and colors your whole relationship with that person, onwards. And it takes a long time, that if that was just one bad day for them, but they're really, a really professional, competent person, it still takes you a while to come over to that side, right? And so, if you look at this little chart here, it's like what you think of yourself and how you see yourself, and what are the objective facts about yourself and stuff that right? Skills that you have. And then there's the other person, and you can't necessarily control how that person perceives you, right? And so they come with a whole bunch of pre-thought out, just perceptions that they have, and then there's the intersection of those two things are what they actually get from what they think and what you've presented, and that part in the middle is really what's left. So let's talk about managing those perceptions. How do we manage that, right? We really need to be aware of our own strengths and weaknesses, right? We know ourselves the best, right? And sometimes it's hard to be really honest with ourselves, but we need to really think about, how we're perceived and what skills we have and what projects we've worked on, and all of those kinds of things, and how do we present those to our audience. I don't think we're really trying to trick someone into knowing something about us, right? You always need to be yourself, right? Because if you're not being yourself, then if you're not being authentic, that also will show through. So we need to present ourselves honestly, but we really need to focus on our strengths and limit the scrutiny of our weaknesses, of any possible weaknesses. Okay. And by the way, if you've got questions, throw them in. Folks will interrupt me if I don't cover something, and then at the end we'll cover anything that we haven't really covered so far. But we're going to talk about these four pieces of a LinkedIn profile: the banner, your profile picture, what the headline is, and this about section. These are all key pieces of your profile. And the reason why they're key is because they're really the first thing that somebody will see in your profile. And if you make comments in LinkedIn or you post in LinkedIn, these are things that will show up as part of that activity. So let's talk about the profile picture, right? I'm sure that you've heard lots and lots of advice on your social media, and you post anything and it'll be there forever. And to some extent that's true, right? This day and age, with the way that recruiters look at a candidate, they research behind, look at how that candidate shows up on Twitter or Instagram or Snapchat, whatever, right? You need to think about how am I presenting myself? And so here in LinkedIn, you really do have control of what that physical view of you actually looks like. All right. And so as we talk about a profile picture, again, this is a first impression, right? It's how seriously do you take your online presence? And, unfortunately, we still live in a world where people look at our appearance and think, oh, is this person serious? Do they take their job seriously? Are they gonna really perform for me? And so, you need to think about what does that picture actually look like, right? Is it serious? Is it competent? Does it actually accurately represent you? remember this is LinkedIn. It's not Snapchat or Instagram or Facebook or any other TikTok or whatever. And so as you think about like, okay, what's this picture, right? What do you think the correct picture would be if you were picking a picture for your professional persona, right? Well, obviously this one, am I trying to get a job? What is that actually conveying, right? This one's not too bad, but it's distracting. There's a lot of stuff going on in the background, and maybe not the one that you want to make that first impression with. And so obviously this one is conservative, safe, professional, but it really depends on what you're trying to actually do, right? So a little sidebar: if you go to my profile, and I'm not sure if folks can actually see that. Let's see if I can actually. Well, I just posted in a question so the moderators can post my LinkedIn profile to you. But as you look at people's profiles, you can look and see what they're really trying to do. Like, so for example, my profile picture is me in a spacesuit helmet at a maker fair, right? And to be fair, right, at this point in my career, I'm not trying to get a job, right? I have a job and I'm probably going to be a teacher for the rest of my career. And I'm not really worried about making a super bold impression with a new college, grad hiring recruitment manager, right? I'm at the end of my career more than I am at the beginning of my career. And so I can play with this a little bit, right? I can be a little more spontaneous. And so that's really the thing that you're going to have to think about as you try and figure out, like, what is that persona, right? I mean, the most safe is a clean, a clean headshot there. But depending on the type of job, depending on what you know about the company, you could be a little more playful. But I would start from the conservative end and go more playful. As you go forward. All right, so how do you take that picture, right? Well, cell phones these days, they have good cameras, right? Find a background that matches your skin tone. Use natural light. A lot of times, if you put yourself in front of like a light coming from a window or something like that, wear something professional. Think about what you would wear to an interview. Maybe put something like that on. LinkedIn allows you to edit your photos. You can try different ones, play with it. You can change it whenever you want. And so we're not going to spend a lot of time on these. You can go back and look at some of these links in the slides later. But we tend to hate taking pictures of ourselves. And so, take a bunch of pictures, try a bunch of things out. I've heard where you take a video of yourself and then take screenshots of the different poses, because you can actually get some better images of what you're actually looking at like that. But put some real effort in. Make it a conscious effort of taking that picture. Don't just pick a picture from a vacation or whatever and post it. There's a lot more tips here as far as like how to actually take a picture. Make sure that they can, your eyes are visible. Don't wear sunglasses or have things blocking your face. There's a trick called the squinch, where you actually you don't squint, but you just kind of give a little tension on your eyes, and it makes your eyes pop out a little bit better. Think about, like, are you looking straight on? Are you looking to the side? Right? There's all kinds of tips, and by no means am I an expert on any of this stuff, but there's a lot of simple things that you can do to make that picture really pop out. All right, here's a whole bunch more links that you can go take a look at later, and of course, just Google LinkedIn profile picture, how to take the best headshot or things like that will get you a long ways. Now the next piece that we look at when we're looking at our LinkedIn profile is the headline. And this probably is one of the most important pieces of the LinkedIn profile. Your headline is this section that shows up under your name, and it's 120 characters, and you should use all 120 characters. We'll look at that in just a second. But this is the piece that travels with whenever you comment on a post or make a post, or somebody comes and looks at your profile or clicks on your name. This is the piece that's going to show up, and it's a place where you can tell a super tiny mini little story, right? This is where you want to let the world know what you're excited about, what your aspirations are, what you want to accomplish, or what kind of job you're trying to get, right? This is the little section there that kind of highlights that. This is the piece that everyone's going to see over and over and over again, and so you really want to make sure that it communicates, really the right message. So as I said, it's 120 characters, right? A little less than a tweet, and you should really think about, like, what are you trying to do with this, right? The goal of this is to actually have someone dig a little deeper into your profile. Go read your about section. Go see what schools or classes or experience that you have, right? And you want to entice them to kind of dive into your profile a little bit, and so that's where you're going to put a bunch of keywords, little short sentences. What are you going to put there? It's more than your name, right? It's really an elevator pitch. Think of this as you have 5 seconds to, like, catch someone's attention and have them kind of dive into your profile. Make no mistake, right? This is where you are trying to present yourself in the very best possible light, and you only have a short number of characters to do it. So take a look, jump on LinkedIn and start clicking through different people's profiles. Look at what they actually say, right? If we look at mine, right, for example, I'm actually doing a couple things, right? Number one, I'm clearly saying that I am a mechatronics engineering instructor, right? And then I'm also kind of throwing a little playful piece in there because my class is really hands-on. My class is it's 3 hours every day, and so it's a big piece of time that students get to do a lot of stuff. And so I label that and I highlight it as fire-breathing robots. Right. And so, I show a serious side, but then I show a more playful side. And then I talk about, the place I work, right? Silicon Valley Career Technical Education. And then I throw in a couple little highlights, right? That, like, in 2019, I was Teacher of the Year for our district. I've presented at some of the teacher conferences. I'm a workshop instructor. And so I've actually added in a few things in that short little space. I've actually told you a lot about myself and what I do, and more importantly, what I can do for you if those are things that you're interested in, right? So as I said before, your headline shows up a lot of different places, right? Anytime you make a post, it shows up. So I post, and then somebody comments on my post. Both of our information will show up, and our headline will be part of that piece. Again, more links here that you can dig into and try out things. All right, real quick, let's talk about the banner. Right, the banner is the piece that's behind your picture, above your headline. There's a little section there. And this is another place, right? Because a lot of people just leave that blank. They just let it be blank, and whatever, the default, maybe some pattern that LinkedIn gives you, they just leave it there, right? And they don't take advantage of that. And so this is another place where you can take advantage of communicating a little bit more about yourself and about things you're interested in and projects you're working on or whatever, right? And so, this is again, most people just ignore this. So pick something that's unique, pick something that stands out, pick something that's going to communicate something about yourself. Mine is basically this electronic background. If anybody was really savvy, they'd realize that that's the layout for a 555 timer. So it's kind of obscure little fact that nobody knows. Plus, I've stuck in my little Steam Clown logo, so I've kind of branded myself a little bit more with that education alter ego that's there, right? I'm actually thinking about changing this a little bit, doing some more things, and it's something that always can evolve. So if we take a look at some others, this is someone I know. She's actually helped our school out, and she's Rosemary's working at a place that a company that one of their projects is building these education robots, right? And so with her profile here, she's got a nice headshot here. She's got a nice explanation of what she does, right? She's Forbes 30 under 30 enterprise technology. So she's telling you a little bit about her credibility there, but she's also put in here some information about this robot, right? Just kind of interesting. Here's some scratch programming. Here's a picture of little robots, right? A little bit more information that kind of highlights the things that she cares about, right? Because knowing her, she is CEO of a couple companies. She is on the board of a number of companies. She is, a luminary in her industry. But the thing that she cares about is this little education robot package that she gets out to middle and high school kids. That's the thing that she's passionate about, and so of all the things that she could have picked, that's what she's putting into her background there. All right, and like I said, there's a bunch of links. More links there that you can go take a look at of things that what your background can do. All right, the last thing I want to talk about is the About profile. And this is really a longer, deeper dive into your story, right? And so this is a section here that's down a little bit lower in your profile, and it's really a place for you to tell the story about yourself that's going to make it stand out from all your other classmates and all the other people who are trying to get the same job that you're trying to get. And so this is really your personal story, right? Who are you? What do you do, or what do you want to do in the future? And what are you really passionate about doing, right? Those are the questions that you want to answer when you're writing your about section. It's really not the place to tell your life story unless a piece of that is actually relevant to what you're trying to do. We always have a hard time writing about ourselves. You've written cover letters, personal introductions. It's hard, right, to really be honest and tell, talk about yourself in a positive way, and sometimes it feels like you're just bragging or you're coming off more important than others, but you really need to think about this section of your profile. You have 2,000 characters, so it's actually quite a big section that you can write about, and it doesn't have to be all professional, right? You can throw in a little personal color and kind of highlight something that maybe is going to make you stand out, right? Let's talk a little bit about power words, right? Keywords. I saw that in one of the questions, like how important are these keywords and things like that. Well, they're kind of important, and one of the reasons why is because more and more these days, before a human actually reads your resume or your cover letter or any material that you're presenting and turning into a recruiter and submitting to some job site, an AI is actually looking at your stuff. They're actually looking at it and trying to match up words and phrases that are part of the job that you're trying to get. And so having some of those words and having some of those phrases in your personal story actually makes that thing pop out and get a higher score, so that it ends up getting into the, hey, read these first pile. As a recruiter myself, I can tell you that looking at a resume, I literally would spend like 1 minute, 2 minutes, just like scanning through that resume, and that's a long time, actually, right? But I would spend about a minute or so looking at a resume, and I would look through it, and I would see, if I was getting them from the same college, then it would look like, okay, all these students, they all took the same type of classes and things like that. And unless something popped out, I didn't care that you took, EE 327, right? That you learned about fast Fourier transforms, right? Everybody did that. And so what I'm actually concerned about, and what I'm actually looking for, is something that pops out about those classes. Like what made it interesting to you? If you took a project class, I don't want to know that you just took a project class. I want to know about the project. I want to know about what you actually did, how it worked. All those kinds of things are part of your story that make you stand out. But definitely, sprinkling these kind of power words, keywords that are words from the industry that you're trying to get into, right? If you're trying to get into an artificial intelligence company or a machine learning company, make sure that you put words in that are words from that industry, right? Into your story. And so, as we think about those power words, you're going to really be missing out if you don't highlight your skills, but use those kinds of words. Right now, use your own words. Right, this is really a story. It could be a sequence of phrases that talk about different skills that you have, but try and wrap it together as a story. Right? What are your accomplishments? What have you accomplished? Did you get the were you president of your chess club? Were you a part of a robot club? Did you get a science award or an engineering award at some competition? Have you met an astronaut? Right? You can tell a little story about that. Do you speak a second language? Maybe that's actually really important, but just dropping that in lets people know that you've actually learned a different language, right? You can explain, like, how do you actually know that? How did you actually learn a second language? Maybe there's an interesting story about that. Can you juggle? Can you ride a unicycle? Right? Those are all little tidbits that you can put into those 2,000 characters. Another way to think about how to answer this and how to put that story together is think about, what if you're being interviewed, and think about interview questions, and then answer those interview questions as part of that about story. And that'll actually, give a lot more information about yourself by basically, answering an interview question type question. So there's some links here that help you kind of dig into that as well. And then you really want to know, your audience. You're writing to them, and so that's another thing about your LinkedIn profile is that it's not static. You should be changing it. Like, if you're trying to get a new job, go from one job to another, well, change your profile to focus on that new job, right? Change that profile to focus on, show what you've been able to accomplish, but how does that apply to that new opportunity that you're trying to get into? If you're trying, I mean, again, right? Many of you are going to be new college grads. You don't necessarily have a lot of experience, right? I mean, some of you may or may not have had much experience as even a part-time job, right? And so highlighting your skills, it's kind of important to like think about, what are the skills that you have, and what things can you actually write about. But you always want to think about that audience that you're trying to talk to, right? So with that, I know that there's probably a lot more questions, and so certainly we've got some time to answer some questions, and I can certainly dive into anything deeper here that you want to know. I've got my email here if you want to contact me as well, and my LinkedIn. You're certainly happy to connect with you on LinkedIn. And if you want, just send me a message. I will personally, if you want me to, give you a quick critique of your LinkedIn profile, right? And so if you want to do that, message me and say, hey, can you I listen to you on this presentation, and I connected with you on LinkedIn, and I'd love to have you look at my profile and give me some pointers. I would be happy to do that kind of stuff. Also, there's a link here at the bottom, and I think a link in the resources to some more material that I'm going to be producing over the summer. That kind of does a much deeper dive into some of these LinkedIn topics of, like, how do you highlight your education? How do you highlight other skills? How do you get recommendations? What are some things to grow your network? We can talk about some of those things now in the Q&A time. So with that, I'm gonna say thanks, and let's jump into our Q&A time. Turn it back to our moderators.
Great, thank you very much, Jim. We've got a bunch of good questions here. I'm going to try to pick and choose, get a good flow going with these. First question that I'm seeing here is, if I have too much stuff on my resume, what's a good order to start removing? How do you prioritize and triage that?
Yeah, so because resumes traditionally have been a piece of paper, and you've always wanted to have it on like one sheet of paper, right? With more and more of our resumes going electronic, it's not as important to make it be like one piece of paper, but it also can't be too long. So you're right. I mean, thinking about like, how do I minimize that? So, number one, showing your education, like where you went to school, what degree you got, that's important. But more important is, like, what did you learn, right? Highlight a particular class, especially if you've done a project class. Like, what was that project? Focus on the things that show your skills, right? So, for example, right, my students, they're high school kids, most of them, and so they don't have a lot of experience. And so, when they say, oh yeah, I work at Wendy's, well, a future employer in a technology field, they probably really don't care that you worked at Wendy's. But if you highlight the fact that, like, at Wendy's, you were an assistant manager and you were responsible for making sure that you didn't run out of inventory, and that every week you were in charge of making sure the orders were processed and verifying that you actually had enough material on hand for, cooking for the day, right? What that's actually telling a future employer is that you're responsible, that you focus on detail. You're able to manage the organization of those materials, right? And so it's not that important that you worked at Wendy's. It's that you actually have a skill, so that when you talk about that skill of being organized and being able to manage inventory, your future employer will go, oh, I want that skill. I want someone with that skill, right? And so really focus more on the skill that you have than a list of things that or jobs that you've done, things like that. Focus more on the skill, I think, is my recommendation.
So I have something to add to that, right? And so, like Jim, my career has spanned multiple years and multiple companies, multiple job types by now. And so my resume, right, if my complete resume, if you print that out on a sheet of paper, will be many, many, many pages long. So what I do is normally, what I think is that normally when people hire you, they hire you for your latest and most pertinent experience. So in your resume, you can actually not necessarily trim out, but truncate or maybe even shrink your prior experience that may or may not be relevant down to essentially just the title, the company you work for, and also the amount of time you've worked there. And that's all you need. You can maybe put a little blurb like inquire for more information at the bottom, but expand the sections that you feel are pertinent to the job so that what you're doing will absolutely so essentially when you expand that out, it will absolutely highlight what you're doing to your future employer. Something else, I want to agree with Jim on this. Your skills will, when you do an engineering job, there are a lot of skills on the side that's highly valued as well beyond the technical side of things. For example, right, managing your team's supply chain when you are building a batch of boards for prototyping. How do you secure those boards? It may tie back to securing the supply at Wendy's. So you never know. So be sure to put in any pertinent mention of pertinent skills in there. That's super important.
Got it. Thanks, guys. I think this is a good follow-up question that someone just submitted. What about personal projects getting attention? This person saying, these projects can be pretty fun, but they're far from professional work level. I know, Jim, you had mentioned if you had project classes or capstone things. So what do you think? Is there a threshold for the right kinds of projects to highlight, or how do you make that call?
Yeah, I think this is super important. All right. So again, think about your resume, your showing yourself off as what you did in school. Well, if you're going to your career center at your college and you're sitting down to interview with some companies there, and you look around the room and there are all the people from your class sitting there, and they all took the same classes, right? And so the recruiter, the last thing they want to hear over and over and over again is that I took EE 342 and it was an interesting class. What they want to know is, what do you know? And so I think that personal projects are an extremely valuable way to go tell your story, right? Because the project itself may not be specific to that job. Maybe it really is, though. Maybe it's exactly the kind of things that they do. And so being able to focus on something that maybe you did outside of school as a personal project shows that you have some initiative, right? Shows that you actually are really interested in this stuff, that you actually will spend your personal time doing it. And then you get to tell the story about how that project worked. What did you learn, right? And so especially if it's a particular skill that those employers are going to want, you have an opportunity to tell a story that's completely different than what anybody else has on their resume. When I look at resumes, especially when I look at resumes, right, I look at that and I just scan through, and the thing that catches my eye is, oh, I worked on this project, I did this thing, we solved this piece of software, or we had to 3D print this thing, and it kept failing, and the way we got around that was by changing this part of it, and then it was strong enough. Things where it shows in those personal projects what you've accomplished, what skills you've gained, and how you actually did it. So yes, I think highlighting personal projects is a great way to tell your story.
Got it. Let's see here. Another question I think that we can jump to. How important is keyword consideration? Should people have like an SEO mindset, when they're making up their profile? And the secondary question here is, how targeted and individualized should it be for each kind of potential recruiter or each submission? Maybe start with the SEO type thing first, though.
Yeah, so there's if you go Google power words and how to use power words and things like that, absolutely you should. I mean, you can definitely go overboard, right? And then it'll kind of show that you're just throwing words in that you don't have any idea about what they mean. But if you're, like I said, if you're trying to get a job, in a 3D printing, environment, you definitely need to show that you actually know something about 3D printing and put in words that are related to the 3D printing industry. Or if you're trying to get into, some artificial intelligence programming, right? And it's machine vision, then yeah, you definitely want to throw in, words that are around the industry of machine vision. And so how do you find those? Well, read a lot of articles, go do research about that, right? Look up, what people are saying. Go to LinkedIn and go find companies that are doing the thing that you want to go do and find out what words they're using. Right. And then, if appropriate, kind of work those same words or phrases into your story, into your headline, so that it pops up. Like I said, a lot of times recruiters are using software to screen, the thousands of people who are applying, to come up with 100 that maybe get looked at for 30 seconds, and then a pile of 10 or 20 that pass that. And so having those keywords in there is actually kind of important. And the second question there was, do you rewrite your resume for every single person that and every single company that you're trying to apply to? Yeah, I mean, you can definitely write a generic one that kind of focuses on an industry or focuses on, your career, like, aspiring, aeronautics engineer, something like that, and then focus on, the aeronautics industry. But if you're trying to get a job at a particular company, number one, go research that company. Find out go look at their job boards, look at all the jobs that they're offering, and think about, like, what skills are they looking for? And think about, do I have that skill, or can I show that I have that skill? Or, hey, I need to go learn this skill. Let me talk about how I'm going to learn this skill, right? And put that into your resume, and focus those resumes, and focus your LinkedIn profile on that industry, or even that particular job. And let's say you're trying to get a particular job at a particular company. Tune your LinkedIn profile to be exactly for that job. And if you get the job, great. If you don't get the job, then you can change your resume to tune it for another one. So yeah, I would spend time thinking about exactly the job that you're trying to get, or the company you're trying to get that job at, and tune your profile and material for that job. It's a lot of work, but I think it's valuable, putting that together.
I see.
So I want to add something here. So Jim talked about power words, and so the other thing you should consider are power verbs. Okay, for example, very often you are not the only person in a project. So if the project is yours and yours entirely, that means you built a project, a barista machine from scratch. Well, you can take ownership of everything. But what if you did a portion of it? Let's say you did a project where you guys brought up a robot, right? Then in that case, you should consider using power verbs to describe your level of participation in the project and what you contributed to. For example, you can say, I've activated the robot, right? Or ways to describe what you have done to contribute in a way that captures the imagination, and it sounds positive, inspirational, and powerful to the person who are reviewing your resume there. So instead of saying, oh, I coded 4,000 lines of code into this, right? You can say, activated robot by entering embedded firmware for blah, blah, blah microcontroller. So that way you are showing that you are taking an active role in that. So power words, power verbs. These resumes get my attention. When I scan resumes, they get my attention more than any other, because it shows that the person is highly motivated as well. So it conveys across a sense of, hey, you know what? I'm dependable if you hire me.
Got it. Thanks, YC. I think what you're both talking about that's really important is, there are thousands of people who could have the same projects that they've done, job experiences, similar things, but solid resumes and things that catch recruiters' eyes are the kind of people who can contextualize and explain, here, I didn't just do this thing, but here's why that experience makes me a good fit for you and why you would benefit from the stuff that I'm bringing to the table, right? So being able to frame that and stand out and explain why those things are linked instead of just kind of dumping all that information out there is definitely important. And I have seen that in resumes I've gone through and hiring processes I've been in myself too. I want to lump together, gentlemen, a couple questions that I'm seeing. I know a lot of people are really interested in kind of the networking and connection side of things as well. So I'm going to read off a couple and we'll just kind of put it out there for discussion. But people are asking things like, how important are connections? What's a good way to connect to people to make a profile stand out? How should we be talking to recruiters or form strong relationships within the industry? So Jim, do you want to talk about that kind of networking side of things and the real human element that goes with that? And then YC would love your insight on that as well.
Yeah, no, I love that. I love this question and this idea because, it's important that you have skills, right? It's important that you've learned stuff in your classes. It's important that you're able to solve problems, and it'd be nice if like, you could present yourself and say, these are the skills I have, you should hire me. But it also, in this world that we live in, I think actually it's more important who you know than what you know. Now, what you know is going to be really important because that's how you're going to actually do your job, right? I mean, very quickly, if you get hired to do a job for a specific skill and, they realize, oh, you don't even have this skill, right? You said you had this skill, but you don't have this skill, right? Very quickly, they're going to realize, that was a mistake, that not a good fit. But getting that job, getting in front of those recruiters, that's where your network really comes in, the who you know. And of course, that's what LinkedIn is all about, right? Is linking people together. And so, yeah, I mean, I saw a couple questions here, like, how do you actually connect with those recruiters? How do you communicate? And so for me, what I tell people when they're trying to build a network, especially within, with LinkedIn makes it really easy. Let's say I go to a meetup. It's either virtual or live, and I'm in there discussing stuff, and we're in a breakout room, we're talking to somebody, or I'm live at some event and I'm talking to somebody, and I say, this is really interesting. I would love to spend more time talking about this. Would you mind if we connected on LinkedIn? And I guarantee you that the answer to that question is invariably almost always going to be, sure, yeah, that'd be great, right? And then what you do is, maybe 10 minutes later or so, you get on your phone, when you've got a break, and connect with them on LinkedIn, or do it within the next day or so, and they'll remember, and they'll go, oh yeah, that's right, I talked to that person. Yes, they accept your connection, right? And this does a couple of things. You now grow a network. When people look at your LinkedIn profile, they see that you're connected to a lot of these different people. The other thing that I always do when I connect with somebody on LinkedIn or any social media environment where there's some messaging system, right? I always send them a message reminding them of how we met, reminding them of what we actually talked about, reminding them if they said, oh yeah, you know what, contact me later and I'll get you this. I remind them of the thing that they said they would do for me. And I also remind them of what I can do for them, right? or how we can interact in the future. And so typically I'll say, hey, it was great to meet you at the event last night. If you remember, I'm the mechatronics teacher. I teach high school kids. I'm really interested in, the new sensor that your company has that you can connect up to a Raspberry Pi. And I would really love to talk to the engineering team on how we could get some of those, in my classroom, right? And I kind of set up this environment where, hey, we're going to talk about this some more. They might even give my class some, right? I might not even have to buy them, simply because of that relationship that we've built. And so, yeah, your network is really important. And so I guarantee you that every interaction professional interaction you have with somebody, just say, hey, that was great. Do you mind if we connect on LinkedIn? And just connect. If you notice on LinkedIn, actually, there's a thing where it shows your number of connections from 0 to 500. So until you have 500 connections, it shows, I've got 37 connections, I've got 92 connections, I've got 240 connections, right? And it shows that. But as soon as you cross 500, it just says 500 plus. And so your LinkedIn job right now is your race to 500. Just make those connections. And so every opportunity you have, just say to somebody, hey, it was great talking to you. Can we connect on LinkedIn? And they're going to say yes. And now you've got a new LinkedIn connection.
Very cool. YC, any thoughts there?
Yeah, absolutely. So that shows you the gamification of the process that LinkedIn actually put in to try and get people more involved. But I'll tell you, it works. Okay, so there are two things that I want to go into a little bit more detail about of what Jim mentioned earlier on, right? So he mentioned two things: meeting people at venues and events, and what you do online to get attention. Okay, so let's talk about the events and venues. So a lot of your students right now, okay, you may or may not be aware, there are a lot of events and conventions and meetups happening in your area. A lot of you are in major university towns or major metropolitan areas right now. Even though we are in a state of pseudo lockdown, I think we're opening up very soon. A lot of conventions are kicking back into high gear. That means starting probably around the time when you go back to school in September of this year, you will start seeing in-person conventions happening again. So try and attend these conventions as much as you can, especially if they do not require you to pay or if the price of entry is not too high. And there's a lot of value in this. For example, out here in San Jose in September, there's something called Sensors Expo happening. And there are hundreds of companies, big and small. You can be a company as big as, don't quote me on this, but maybe NVIDIA, right? Or it can be as small as a little mom and pop engineering company. But they will all be exhibiting their sensors products and expertise and services there. You should attend these. Collect as many flyers as you can. Go from booth to booth and ask them, what do you do? Hey, I'm a student. I am graduating, or I just graduated. And you don't have to pass resume, but ask them, can I connect with you on LinkedIn? Keep a notepad and say, yes, booth number, blah, blah, blah. Such and such company, CEO of this company said, or the the team lead for RFID at this company said, yes, they want to connect. Then go on LinkedIn and connect with them, and attend as many of these as you can. They are happening all the time in the background, and it also makes you. It makes you appear as someone who's more involved in that portion of the industry you're interested in as an engineering student. So, and in-person events are kicking back into gear again. So take advantage of that as much as you can. There are also meetups in your area. There are IoT meetups. There are AWS meetups. There are robotics meetups. And these are like-minded people. Very often the people who are funding these meetups may actually be VCs or entrepreneurs or executives from companies. Go to your local meetup. Be more active. The people at your meetup will be able to network or help you find a job at some point in time. If not, if you're starting your own company, they may be very useful context to have. So the other thing is, how do you get attention on social media? Well, this is where, hashtag comes in really handy. A lot of you are posting your projects on LinkedIn. Okay. And if you look at, for example, Digikey's LinkedIn profile or Digikey Academic Programs LinkedIn profile, whenever we post something, we may have hashtag such and such, hashtag such and such. We do that because we want to get attention from these other groups that may or may not see these posts normally. So we're adding the hashtag so it expands our reach. You can do that for your project too. You can do that for your posts as well, right? For example, if you say, hey, you know what, I wrote, I did a nice project on, disposable face mask solutions, or a UV hand cleaning, UV cleaning product, right? You can say, hey, hashtag this, hashtag that, and you start getting these, because what happens is you start finding that people in those groups may start paying attention to you. And then they start saying, hey, this student here, she or he may be super motivated. And you know what? I have this idea, or I have this company. I know this guy person who's looking for a job. I'm going to, start making all the necessary connections to make this happen. So there are a lot of possibilities here. Right? Make the most of the tools that's available to you. Make the most of the events in your area that's available to you. It makes you stand out. And if I see a student at Sensors Expo or ArmTechCon, or AWS reInvent, I'm standing in the booth and a student comes up to me and say, hey, normally you don't expect to see students here, but here I am. I'll be super impressed. It'll leave an impression in my head. So anyway.
Yeah, no, and I agree, and I know we're about out of time, but the other thing that I would recommend that you do is, get on LinkedIn and do those searches. Search for, topics, search for people, search for companies that you're interested in, and follow some of the people that are there. And if they write an article that you're really interested in, make a comment on that article. Right, on how that affected you, or make a comment on like, hey, I was doing the same thing, and this is an interesting thing that I found, and by doing that, you're going to expose yourself to some of these people. I can't tell you how many, as a teacher, not as a professional in the industry, as a teacher, how many CEOs that I'm connected with and have had conversations with at events that like YC has said, the live events, and I feel like I can actually connect with them and ask them questions, and so it's amazing how you'll connect with people and have these professional connections by just simply going to an event or commenting on an article or writing your own articles and posting them on LinkedIn.
Awesome. Well, gentlemen, I want to thank you both very much for your time. I think everyone who's here in attendance, your obvious first homework is to go add both of these guys to your LinkedIn profiles. Go get connected to them. This has been an incredibly interesting and relevant conversation. Jim, YC, thank you both very much for your time.
Well, thank you. And don't forget, everyone, add the Digikey LinkedIn profile to your, start following that.
Absolutely.
Okay. All right, thank you, Jim. Thank you, everyone.
And we look forward to seeing you all at another Digikey Ambassador webinar sometime soon.